So a very warm welcome to all of our audiences, as well as Associate Prof Technologies, Dr. Vimala Balakrishnan. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Vimala.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, so Dr. Vimala today has graced us with her presence, and we'll be speaking on the very interesting topic called artificial intelligence, our new digital guard for cyberbullying. So before we delve right into the very interesting topic, let me just let the audience know a bit about Dr. Vimala. So Dr. Vimala is an associate professor in the Faculty of Computer Science and Information Technology in University Malaya, and she has been so since 2010. So besides that, she also holds a PhD in ergonomics from the Multimedia University. Also with that, a master's and bachelor degrees from University of Science Malaysia. Prof. Vimala is a Fulbright Research Scholar, as well as a recipient of the Leadership in Innovation Fellowship Award, which was conferred by the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK. Prof. Vimala has great interest in both machine learning as well as deep learning, and it's particularly related to social media, something that us millennials are very much interested in as well. She's also an advocate in interdisciplinary research, and this is evidenced by her research work in a lot of other domains and fields such as healthcare, education, and social issues such as cyberbullying and misinformation, one of which will be our topic for today. In terms of articles, she has published more than 85 articles in top index journals, 55 conference proceedings, has 4 patents and 8 copyrights. And we are honored to have with us the top 2% world scientists, as mentioned by the Stanford University, both in 2020 and 2021. And she is also can be considered as a local star, appearing in the local media such as newspapers, television, and radio to share her work on cyberbullying. So I think after that very impressive introduction, I think we are honored to have you here with us, Dr. Vimala.
You are too kind, Joel. Thank you.
All right, so I think let's get to the bulk of our podcast today. Once again, the title is Artificial Intelligence, our new digital guard for cyberbullying. So just some basic questions just to get the ball rolling, Dr. Vimala. What defines cyberbullying?
Okay, so basically, cyberbullying refers to the act of hurting someone, either an individual or groups of individuals, intentionally through digital technologies. So these digital technologies can be social media, your mobile phone, WhatsApp, and whatnot.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Vimala. And since we are talking about how artificial intelligence can combat this cyberbullying, I think a lot of us may have different images on what artificial intelligence is about. Some may picture a Jarvis-like system from the movie Iron Man, or maybe the character Vision in Avengers. But what exactly is artificial intelligence?
Sometimes when I ask students what is artificial intelligence, they just say robot. To a certain extent, they are right. But in layman terms, artificial intelligence is simulating machines to act and think like human beings.
All right, that is pretty interesting. And since human beings themselves think in many, many different ways, so I guess I can't wait for the future of artificial intelligence. So coming back to the topic of cyberbullying, are there different forms of cyberbullying in your opinion?
There are many, and that's what makes it very difficult to detect and isolate cyberbullying incidences, right? Some of the popular ones are harassment. When you harass someone, that is by attacking an individual consistently on social media, for example, that is a form of cyberbullying, right? There is something known as happy slapping. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it. Happy slapping is basically situations where an individual is being physically bullied, and other users, let's say, they take a video of that incident, then they circulate that video. That is known as happy slapping. Exclusion is also a form of cyberbullying. Exclusion basically means when you purposely exclude an individual in a group discussion or an event That can be a form of cyberbullying as well. Masquerading is cyberbullying. Cyberstalking, cyberbullying. Trolling can be considered as cyberbullying as well. So there are just many forms of cyberbullying out there.
I see. Yeah, that's quite interesting to hear. And I think based on that, I think many of us, me included, may be unknowingly cyberbullying, since there could be many different forms of cyberbullying.
I hope not. Let me emphasize on that if I did not mention this just now. One of the key things that differentiate aggression versus cyberbullying is the word repetitive. For cyberbullying, it has to be repetitive in nature. So let's say, for example, I go online today and then I post something, you are so ugly, you don't deserve to live. All right? That is not cyberbullying. That is considered as an aggression. Right? However, if let's say my followers pick up on my post and they keep commenting similar things or even share my post, these can be considered as repetitive nature already, because you've already broadcast it to a wide audience. These can be considered as cyberbullying. It's no longer an aggression.
I see. All right. Thank you so much for clearing that up, Dr. Vimala. I think that's a very important distinction between aggression and cyberbullying. So when looking at the local context in Malaysia, where things can go viral with the switch of a button or with a click of the button send, what is the sort of a frequency of occurrence of cyberbullying in Malaysia?
See, that's quite a tough question to answer, because unlike census, this is not a ready figure that is available. So what I can share is like from recent reports that I've come across, like we as in Malaysia ranked second in Asia in 2020 for cyberbullying among youths. This is a report provided by UNICEF, right? So they work with children, right? So ranking at number 2 for cyberbullying is not something to be proud of. Other statistics include one from Cybersecurity Malaysia. This is actually a branch that takes care of crime in terms of digital content. Their record is 2001 cases of cyberbullying that has been reported. The cases that has not been reported, no one knows, all right? So in 2019, there were about 201. 2020, 596. That's almost the double, all right? And right up to middle of 2021 is 267, sorry. So that's the prevalence rate in our country.
I see. I think that's a rather disturbing fact as well, to know that we are second in Southeast Asia, and I guess it will continue to go on unless we do something about it. And moreover, with the pandemic, where everyone's stuck at home, and then the use of technology is even more increased, and I guess that maybe could contribute as well, Doctor.
Yes, since you touched on that point, let me just add on. During the pandemic, cyberbullying cases have actually increased, not only in Malaysia, but it's a worldwide phenomenon. Simply because too many people are spending too much time online.
I see. Yeah, maybe that's one area in which we can control as well in order to reduce the cyberbullying. So coming to the core issue of why cyberbullying happens. When we look at schools, and there's always school bullies, a lot of these school bullies tend to be associated with broken or dysfunctional families, or maybe bad influence and various other factors. So in terms of cyberbullying, why exactly does cyberbullying happen? Is it humans' nature to talk badly about other people? Is it due to poor moral education? Or could there be any other factors that could lead to this?
I don't think it's human nature to talk badly about people. You mentioned something about bullying cases, of how they come from a broken family and whatnot. Now, there is a huge difference between traditional bullying and cyberbullying, right? Cyberbullying is something that takes place in the cyber world. So the effect or the consequences of cyberbullying is not obviously prominent. Say, compared to a traditional bullying, if you go in and then hit an individual, right, you can see the effect immediately on the victim. However, that is not the case when we talk about cyber victims. They usually suffer more of psychological trauma like depression, anxiety, and so on, right? So one of the reasons can be, as a perpetrator, people are not aware of the consequences they have on the victim. They don't know how serious their action can be. That has been observed as one of the motivation for cyberbullying. Other than that, there are also evidence that individuals who engage in traditional bullying have a higher tendency to cyberbully as well, right? One of the attraction of doing things online is anonymity. I don't have to show my face. I don't have to, show my identity. I can go out and slander someone and that person may not even know who I am. So all these are considered as characteristics of technology, right? So we did a study back in 2017 where we interviewed about 399 young adults in Malaysia. By young adults, I am talking about those between 17 to 36 years old. The idea of the project was actually to identify why cyberbullying is actually taking place, right? So the main motivation that we found is social-cultural. Social-cultural basically here means peer influence, right? Peer influence is one, and another thing is a social environment. By that I mean, if an individual is surrounded by people who engage in cyberbullying and the society or community thinks that cyberbullying is okay, it's not a big deal, people should not fuss about it. Now there is a higher tendency for that individual to engage in that activity as well. These we found as the significant factor for cyberbullying to take place. Other than that is technology. Like I said, anonymity is one thing. Another motivating factor is availability. Availability over here basically means there are so many options for me to cyberbully. If today, let's say, I want to attack you, I can do it through WhatsApp. There are groups in WhatsApp, that is one. I can go onto Facebook to do it. There's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's Twitter. There is just simply too many avenues for me to cyberbully. So that unfortunately makes it very attractive for the perpetrators because they can actually humiliate an individual through various means and thus ensuring there is a wide audience for them, because this is what they usually look out for. They want to humiliate someone and they want as many people out there to know that this individual has done certain things. Okay, so that is availability. One more factor, even though it was not majorly significant, but it is quite disturbing to know that a lot of Malaysians do it for the sake of entertainment. They think it is fun to do that to another individual. And this brings me back to the first point that I told you, that a lot of people are not even aware of the consequences of what they are doing. And sadly, many are not even aware that what they are doing can be actually considered as cyberbullying. Yeah. The awareness is not there. Yeah.
That's very well understood, Doctor. So just to sum up your points on what are the factors that could cause, number one would be not being aware of the consequences, because to them it's just a screen. They can just type whatever they want to anyone, and then because they don't see the person physically,
right? And
then you have anonymity because they could just be anonymous persons trying to hurt someone else, as well as accessibility. So there are various avenues in which they can cause harm to this person. So just a follow-up question to that, Doctor. In terms of accessibility, and like not being able to see the person, so you have the freedom of consequences there. So on the flip side, to the victim as well, since that person, that bully, that cyberbully is just another person on the screen, to what extent does it affect the person? Is it very individualized, or could they just choose to shut off whatever negative comments and then just go on with their lives? So in other words, my question would be, how to what extent does these negative comments sort of affect people?
It goes back to each individual, right? Some can handle such a situation. Unfortunately, there are many who do not have that maturity to handle when you are being bullied. Okay. So, for example, if you're on social media, for example, Facebook these days, you can actually flag or report a comment that is abusive in nature. So, let's say today I go online and I see someone posting hurtful comments about me, right? So, I can choose to ignore, I can choose to do something about it, and by that I mean I can choose to report, right? Or I can choose to retaliate as well. And that's when the problem starts, when the victim chooses to retaliate in a negative manner. Basically, that means victim changing into another bully. We call this the bully victim cycle. It's a very dangerous cycle, right? Because there are many cases where victims, right, they don't know how to handle that situation. The first thing that comes into their mind, you get angry when someone is cyberbullying you. You are humiliated online, right? So there is a high tendency for you to revenge. Sometimes they take revenge on the bully. Sometimes they perform the same action, however, on a totally random user. Okay? So there are many ways how victims actually retaliate to a situation. And to answer your question, it all goes back to whether the individual is capable of handling that situation or not. A lot of people say it's so simple. If you think you are being cyberbullied, someone is hurting you, insulting you online and all that, just block the user. And that's the best thing that you can do, just block the user, that's it, all right? But there is also a lot of psychological impact on the victim. Psychological impact can actually range from a lot of things. It's not only like you're talking about being sad, being depressed, but physical symptoms as well. A lot of victims have been known to lose sleep over incidents. They lose appetite. That happens as well. So the consequences are there. It's very hazardous, but like what I said, it's not visible immediately. So maybe that's the biggest challenge and danger when you talk about cyberbullying and its impact on its victims.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. I think I really agree on the fact that the psychological effect is much profound because the wounds are not visible. They are inside, and for it to manifest outside, it's going to take a while and a lot of hurt and a lot of, this penting up of emotions. And yeah, I also agree with the idea of, just blocking them. That's the best thing you can do. But then again, I think it all depends on the person, because it's easy for one person to say, oh, just block them, it's fine. But only that person knows the hurt that the words, has caused them. And so I think that's a good concept as well. So Doctor, moving on to the next question. You mentioned that traditional bullying and cyberbullying is very, very different. So, in traditional bullying, you can actually see the act happening and you see the consequences happening. And this is different in cyberbullying. One interesting thing that I would like to propose is that normal people, or, our friends and those we associate with, could they be potential, does it concern you that they could be cyberbullies as well? So they are wolves in sheep's clothing. How do we sort of detect them? And, so just like to hear your opinion on that.
So when I saw that question, you guys used the term normal. Actually, there is no such thing as someone is normal and abnormal. You today can be a cyberbully as well, for all I know, because a lot of things are taking place because behind the keyboard, you see. So to answer your question, yes, there can be perpetrators among us. You wouldn't know unless they strike. And that's the thing about being online. I can just create a fake ID, and after this, maybe I just get hold of your social media identity and all that, and then I start insulting you. That's possible. And then I go out, and then I'm not saying I'm a cyberbully, but I go out and then I lecture, and then you look at me, oh wow, she is like this, but behind the screen, she's a totally different character. So yes, it's possible. Even your good friends could be perpetrators.
All right, thanks, Doctor. I think it's a troubling fact to know that. So I think once they strike, we must try our best to mitigate all of that. So, Doctor, you mentioned a lot on the psychological effects and all that. So, in terms of Malaysia as well, how sort of are you aware of like how many people are actually affected, and in what ways are they affected? So maybe you could explain more on the psychological aspects of it as well?
No, giving numbers in this situation is actually very difficult because you have to understand that first and foremost, it's very difficult to identify a victim unless they come forward and make a report. In most cases, believe me or not, they will not report for various reasons, all right? Young adults especially, like let's say you are aware that you are being cyberbullied, for example, there is a sense of embarrassment for young adults to go out openly and say, hey, look, I've been cyberbullied, because they're afraid of being laughed at, because you're considered as an adult, you should be able to handle the situation, right? Therefore, when no one comes forward and reports, it's very difficult for us to report a number. So to go back to your question, I don't think I can give you a specific number to say how many of the victims are actually psychologically affected. Even when they are being treated for trauma and those kind of things, not necessarily you can easily connect it is because of cyberbullying. You understand? So we don't have those kind of numbers.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. So I think now we can come to the second half of our podcast in which we try our best to use artificial intelligence in order to combat cyberbullying. So how can artificial intelligence, or AI in short, how can that be integrated to sort of mitigate or combat cyberbullying?
Okay, most of the work involving artificial intelligence and cyberbullying are related to detection mechanisms, right? So when I say detection mechanisms, it basically means the machine will automatically try to identify whether a certain communication has the nature of cyberbullying or not, right? So most of the research work are based on social media. Majority of the work are based on textual communication, right? Very few have looked into images and very, very few have looked into videos, right? So let me elaborate a little on how we do this based on textual communication, right? So you are on social media, let's say you are on Twitter, it's a public platform. That means for researchers, we can actually crawl data easily, right? So you are communicating and I crawl the data, then I have a lot of textual communication. The simplest way to identify incidents of cyberbullying is through what we call a keyword-based approach. A keyword-based approach is very fundamental approach. Basically, how it works is it looks for specific keywords. Hate, right? Anything profanities, vulgar words, and those kind of things, it picks up all these words, and based on those words, it will actually classify, look, this particular sentence has the traits of cyberbullying, something like that. So that's the simplest mechanism, right? There are other advanced techniques like machine learning, deep learning, algorithms and whatnot. In my research specifically, what we did is we tried to tap into the user's characteristics as well, right? So not only about what you are actually posting on social media, but I would like to get to know you more as a person. And the way we did this is, for example, we looked into user's personality. Okay, evidence have showed that people who engage in cyberbullying, they tend to be more neurotic. They tend to be more extrovert. That means you're all out, you don't mind talking, you publish everything online. These kind of characters have a higher tendency to engage in cyberbullying. So what we did is we manipulated these user characteristics and then we tried to see whether there is a certain trait of users that can be linked to cyberbullying incidents. And we found that users who score low on agreeableness and high on narcissism. Narcissism basically means people who like to show off. They tend to engage in cyberbullying perpetration more compared to other users. User personality is an example. Another example is user's emotion. Okay? So what we found out is when we incorporated users' emotion, we found that anger and sadness are very strongly correlated to the victim instead of cyberbullies. So these are various angles that we are actually investigating, and to propose to come up with a model that can automatically detect cyberbullying incident online. It's more for detection. Let me just since we are talking about tools and whatnot, AI tools are not meant for victims to use to report. That is just a basic tool. Most of the AI tools and research focuses on automated detection so that early intervention strategies can be administered to the victims and also bullies. So the tools and mechanisms are more relevant to the authorities instead of the victim themselves. Parents can also use it if they are monitoring their children's communication. Because children usually, they are very vulnerable. They are online and they are publishing a lot of things out there. So tools like this can actually help parents to monitor. So that's where AI comes in.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. I think after that, I am quite interested as well in seeing how these machines can learn to pick up all of this. So I think you mentioned that now some of the main ways that are being used is keyword based, where we look at all these phrases or words that are negative in nature. And then another way is looking at the characteristics or traits of the person itself. So these are all very much based on the bully. How about on the other side? Has there been any has artificial intelligence been used to sort of look out for the victims, or any way in which they can guide victims to seek help?
The explanation I gave just now is not specifically for bullies. It is also for victims. Like what I said, when we used emotion, the anger and sadness is actually tied to the victims more compared to the bullies. Usually when we do a detection mechanism, the main goal is of course to identify bullies and victims. Okay, but there is also another role. These are witnesses. They play a key role in cyberbullying studies because witnesses are people who have actually witnessed other cyberbullying incidences taking place. Now, they can be passive witness, they can be active witness as well. Passive basically means I know something is wrong, but I choose to ignore. That is equivalent as you cyberbullying as well, right? Active basically means if I intervene and let's say I say, hey, look, I think you are cyberbullying, this is not right. Now I am considered as a defender. I can also choose to go the other way. I join in the cyberbullying communication and then I say, yo man, you are right, she is actually like fat, something like that. Even though I am a witness, now I am considered as an assistant. This is the term that we use. You can be a defender or an assistant, right? Witnesses are usually the largest group of users online. So it is also important for detection mechanisms to tap into these people and to detect them as well, right? But in any cyberbullying studies, the main goal is, of course, first identify the victim and the bullies, because we want to help them out. If bullies, in fact, both bullies and victims, they both need counseling. So that's how you can go around identifying.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. So it seems like this AI is a very well-rounded approach where everyone is sort of monitored, not only the bully and the victim, but as well as the bystanders. So, Doctor, when we are looking at artificial intelligence, I think some can't help but think of the movie I, Robot, which is a very old movie, in which Vicky is the main antagonist who wants to sort of wipe out the human race, if I'm not mistaken. So, do you see any potential drawbacks in applying AI in terms of detecting cyberbullying?
I would like to throw that question back to you. As a social media user coming from a very young generation, you use the term millennial. All right. Do you see any drawback in this or not? Would you like to see something like that?
Well, I guess for me, the main drawbacks would be, I think, in terms of privacy, as well as in terms of freedom of speech. Because in an argument, sometimes it's difficult to get the whole picture. And when there's people arguing on certain things and the negative things are thrown out, it's often difficult to look at who's right or who's wrong. Obviously, the fact that, hateful comments are wrong, but I think for me, it's always important to look at the whole picture, and which is why I don't engage in all of this stuff, and I don't even have a Twitter account because I'm just writing myself. Yeah.
Yes, so you're telling me you have issue if I were to tell you that I'm going to monitor your communication.
Yes, I think to a certain extent, because you mentioned that AI is used in terms of looking at textual stuff, pictures and videos. So I guess when a person is out there in the social media, and you mentioned that AI can also help to track a person's character and get to know the person. So yeah, I'm just wondering, in terms of that, would that cause an issue in terms of privacy?
Okay, usually when we come up with the models and approaches like this, we can't just go out and implement and start collecting your data. That is not going to happen, right? One simulation that we did is you choose to use my app, for example, right? Let's say I call it a cyberbullying detection app, right? And then the first thing that I will do is ask your permission if I can access your social media account or not. So as a user, if you're comfortable in the tool scraping your communication, then you provide authorization. If you provide authorization, then I can monitor your conversation. Monitoring conversation doesn't mean that the minute I see you venting out your frustration online, I'm going to do something about it. No. Like I said, it goes back to the definition of cyberbullying. It has to be repetitive in nature. Just because the tool sees, okay, one post or one-time incident, we call it, doesn't mean you are going to be flagged as an abuser. No, it's going to monitor for a period of time, and then based on that, it will identify, okay, there seems to be a pattern of abusive communication. However, it warrants further investigation. No one is going to come after you. Okay, Joel, the machine says that you've been flagged as a cyberbully. That's not going to happen because, like what you said, it's not a very straightforward process, but the tool can be helpful. So if you ask me whether there is going to be an issue or not, I don't see it as an issue unless you think it's going to be an issue because of the nature of your communication.
All right. Thanks, Doctor. That's a very interesting comeback as well. So, Doctor, you mentioned that because privacy is a huge thing now, and every time we open something, there's always these privacy policies that we need to agree to. So, do you see a potential in which all of these big platforms start to utilize, if not already utilized, but start to implement more stricter guidelines with using AI in terms of combating cyberbullying? And how do you think that will go, or how do you think that will be accepted by the users?
You see, the privacy guidelines are there for all social media platforms. But the question is, have you ever read it? I would admit I have never looked at the privacy guideline on Facebook. We just go out and use it. So majority of the users do not read those things. We just assume that things are all okay, it is safe. When actually they are actually tracking and collecting a lot of data about us, not necessarily something that is related to cyberbullying, right? Cyberbullying is a worldwide phenomenon and it is still taking place. Therefore, a lot of social media are actually actively working towards this. However, from what I know, the majority of their approaches are very proactive in nature. By that, I mean they empower users to do something about it. So like what I said just now, Facebook, if you think a post is very insulting and you find it offensive, you can actually flag it as an abusive. That is one. There is an option for you to block users. That is also a mechanism to address abusive users, right? Twitter has a timeout feature. But a timeout feature, I don't think it's going to work because a timeout feature basically suspends the suspected bully for a certain period of time, but after that they can continue using their account. That is a feature. Instagram has something similar as well. It has timeout feature and also allows user to block and to report abusive users. But you see, all of these mechanisms are there for users to use. You can report if you think you are being cyberbullied, but tools automatically detecting and saying, hey, look, your post contains abusive words. Are you sure you are going to post this? I've yet to see that. And this is what we are hoping to see. We call this nudging. All right, when you nudge a user or someone, something like that. So basically what we have in mind is they've used it in other domains, like fake news studies, right? So basically the way it's going to work is, let's say you are angry at this point in time, so you're venting out your frustration on social media platform, right? So when you hit the send button, before it actually publishes that post, it will tell you, okay, Joel, look, 80% of the words in your post is offensive. Are you sure you want to post this, or would you consider rephrasing? Now, that 1 second of nudging has been shown to improve the user in his thought process. Actually, something you did not realize, so you may consider to rephrase and whatnot. So these are baby steps, we call it, but it has been shown to work, and this is what I would like to see happening.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, I guess nudging is a very good way as well. Because when we act in anger, oftentimes we regret it later on. So, even that 1 second of just stepping back and, before posting, should I really post this? Because once you post, it's out there. Yeah. So,
it's just
yeah. Okay, I'd just like to follow up on the question on the user power, where you say these platforms actually empower users in order to block. So I've seen many times since I'm on Instagram, I've seen one too many times where there will be an argument in which a group of users do not agree with the opinion on the group of another user, and sometimes they can be too fanatic about their opinions, and if they have a very large follower base, they can sort of say, hey, let's go and block this guy because we don't like his opinion. And so it's sort of like and then that guy can go and block the other guy. So like you mentioned, the victim bully cycle, where the victim now becomes the bully against the other bully. So where does AI come into this picture? Should AI intervene in this case? And if so, to what extent, and where should they draw the line?
You see, so let's just focus on the scenario that you gave, right? So based on that scenario, you're asking me where AI comes in. I'm still thinking about the detection mechanism, right? Because you're talking about a lot of people, groups of people. You want to block them or not, that's entirely your choice, all right? Maybe some people enjoy reading this kind of things, watching other people bullying each other and whatnot. It's not my problem. Witnesses, people are witnesses. So that's one thing. But if you are specifically asking me how AI can intervene, then it goes back to the detection mechanism. First of all, you see, you're talking about machine, not a human. So that is AI, you're training the machine to act and think like a human. So based on my algorithm, what it's going to do is, first, it will monitor the communication, okay? And then it will look for the keywords, it will look for certain patterns, whether there is a repetitive nature or not. And if it suspects that, yes, this is very aggressive, can be considered as cyberbullying, then maybe it can raise a flag or something. So like I said, again, it goes back to the developer. We can actually nudge the users themselves, right, as an alert. Send an alert to those engaging in that conversation. Look, your conversation is inappropriate. Just something like that nudging thing. All right. Now, when we do this, the participants actually know, okay, they have taken it to a different level, so they need to mellow down, something like that. Alternatively, such results can be sent to the relevant authority as well. We're talking about counselors. We are talking, if Malaysia means, we are talking about MCMC. They are the one who is responsible for digital content and crime and whatnot, right? So it can work both ways. So it all depends, like if you talk about privacy, if you're so concerned about privacy, maybe I am not able to report your case to MCMC, those kind of things. So there are going to be, I wouldn't say drawback, but problems or difficulties in implementing AI. By the end of the day, as users, you have the power to say no.
All right. Thank you so much for your take on that, Doctor. So, Doctor, in terms of cyberbullying, like you mentioned, we can always target the bully, looking at the keywords, the characteristic traits. At the same time, we can also look out for the victims by looking at their emotions. And I think two that you mentioned are anger and sadness. So, in your opinion, where should be the appropriate target? Should we mainly put our efforts in stopping these cyberbullies, or should we mainly focus on helping these or empowering these victims, or should it be a very well-rounded, equal approach?
I would say you should go for both. In the previous research and all that, there is a lot of emphasis on victims. Okay, they want to identify the victims because they want to counsel the victims so that they are able to handle their emotion and the consequences. But these days, the approaches are actually being targeted to bullies as well, because most of the times, bullies are also suffering. They are also emotionally affected. There is a reason why they are engaging in such an antisocial behavior. So they can be counseled as well. That means they need help as much as the victims as well. So approaches, whether we are talking about intervention, prevention, should include both parties.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. So, Doctor, in status quo in Malaysia itself, we've talked about how this AI can be used in so many cases, both for victims and bullies. But as of now, are there any of these approaches or use of AI in terms of combating cyberbullying?
No. Not only in Malaysia, even worldwide, not that I know of. However, I have seen tools that promote education and awareness. Netherlands is one of the countries that they have introduced cyberbullying tools for their elementary school students, right? So it's something like games, right, where they're actually trying to teach cyberbullying to children through games. And it has worked wonders. I think something like that should be introduced to Malaysia as well, because it all begins from awareness. Like what I told you right from the beginning, even adults, many do not know what constitutes cyberbullying. They think it is okay to engage in name calling on social media. It's fun, right? But actually, it's not.
All right, Doctor. And just the follow-up question: technology has advanced so much, but yet, like you mentioned, almost everywhere we don't see these AI being used. So, what do you think is the biggest factor that is stopping this? And how can we implement AI in social media sooner?
Maybe you yourself have answered this question just now when we talked about privacy. Your generation makes the biggest proportion of users on social media. Okay? And yet, even though you know how important the detection of cyberbullying is, you are very hesitant in allowing the tool to monitor your conversation. So, if I were to implement an AI detection tool like this, where your communication is being monitored, if let's say I'm the Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, this one, I wouldn't want to implement such a tool because I know my users are not going to be comfortable in that. See, it all goes back to, again, user privacy. If I feel that the majority of social media users are not keen because they don't want, it is understood, right? In a real world, all right, let's just differentiate real world and cyber world. If you have 1,000 followers who are following you, you're not going to be very comfortable. But on social media, it's different. The more followers you have, the more popular you think you are. All right, so it's different. So when you say that why technology is there, it's a matter of abusing it or using it for a good purpose, right? So if you're asking why AI is not being implemented, and these are the hurdles, right? It is nothing new. We know it can be done, but the hurdles is whether it is ethical or not to do something like this. Would social media users actually provide authorization or permission for us to monitor their communication? I will let you know. I do not engage in any offensive or name callings on social media on my account. However, if you're telling me, hey, look, I'm going to monitor all your communication, yes, there is going to be a sense of discomfort. That's human nature. And probably this is the biggest hurdle that we see when it comes to implementing AI into automatic cyberbullying detection.
Right. Thank you for your honesty as well, Doctor. So I guess we all feel the same way when all our texts are exposed as well. So, Doctor, after looking at how bad cyberbullying is and how beneficial AI could be in terms of targeting cyberbullying, what would be your aspirations, goal, or vision in terms of AI as a guard for cyberbullying?
The aspiration keeps changing from time to time. But personal aspiration at this point in time is basically I just want to engage in more digital work, particularly in interdisciplinary research, especially social science. So not only am I exploring AI in cyberbullying, but also in fake news or misinformation dissemination, which seem to have become another problem, especially during the pandemic.
Yes, that's true, Doctor. I've seen many cases. One day I received 3-4 messages, all with different cases on the number. So yeah, I guess that's one thing to comment. As most of our viewers for this podcast would be, I would say, millennials, would there be any parting last words of advice you can give to us?
I'll keep it very simple. When you're online, post, don't roast. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. That's a very nice advice. So once again, I'd like to thank Associate Prof. Dr. Vimala for sharing her thoughts on AI in terms of combating cyberbullying. So thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Joel, for your time and for this opportunity, and for your team as well. You guys have done a good job. I think it is a good initiative, so keep it up.